Welcome back to ABC News Live. First, the medical examiner's on the stand right now in the Karen Reed murder retrial. Reed is accused of hitting her police officer boyfriend John O'Keefe with her SUV. The defense argues she dropped O'Keefe off at a house party and left. Earlier today, the defense asked a lab analyst about examining that SUV, and now they're asking the medical examiner about O'Keefe's autopsy. Let's go to ABC News Live anchor Phil Lipoff and civil trial attorney Tre Lovell for more. Tre, talk to me about the strategy here. What are you listening for as they question this medical examiner?
Yeah, so the medical examiner really needs to tie in the injuries to being consistent with getting hit by the truck. Because as we know, the big issue in this case is whether or not the SUV that impacted Mr. O'Keefe and killed him, or it was something else. It was a fight or a dog or something have you. So the medical examiner is part of the expert team to try to put together the forensic side of this, the medical science, to tie the fact that O'Keefe was killed by Reed through her SUV.
Tre, in most murder cases, you're debating whether or not the person committed the crime. In this case, they are actually debating the way John O'Keefe died entirely, a completely different manner of death. So given that context, how critical is this medical examiner's testimony?
Very critical. You know, we have a lot of testimony regarding admissions from her, acknowledgement that the taillight was broken, before. But the real, the tinge of the case is going to come down to the science, to the experts, to the accident reconstructionist, to the medical science, because that's what's empirical, that's what's objective. People's memories can fade. You can explain certain things through testimony, but when it comes to science, it's more secure, and it tends to be more credible to a jury.
Tre, how do you think this testimony is going so far in the prosecution's attempt to try to prove that O'Keefe died from being hit by an SUV?
Well, it's going okay so far. I mean, right now they're really establishing the procedure. They're making sure that's locked in, so that can't be challenged, and her findings can't necessarily be challenged. So that's what we're doing right now. But the ultimate goal is if she can't determine specifically what the cause of death was, certainly if it's consistent with the theory of the prosecution. So that's really what she's here for. She's another piece in the puzzle to substantiate their case.
Tre, Dr. Scortibello is still being questioned by the prosecution. How do you think they're trying to get ahead of the doubts the defense will raise during cross-examination?
Yeah, so they're going to use her, to back up the fact that the impact is consistent with an SUV. The injuries are the way the body was is consistent with an SUV, which is very important. Now the defense, as in almost every case, is going to have their own experts, and they're going to have a different rendition of what happened, and they're going to come up with a different theory. But what we got to remember is this: the prosecution has the burden of proof. So as long as the defense can poke holes, and it could have been this, it could have been that, whereas the prosecution has to lock it in. This is how we died through this homicide beyond a reasonable doubt. So their standard is much higher. Whereas the defense, they can just kind of, show that maybe not, maybe, and then, at that point, it would be a hung jury or an acquittal.
Welcome back to ABC News Live. First, the medical examiner is on the stand in the Karen Reed murder retrial. Dr. Irini Scortibello performed John O'Keefe's autopsy in 2022. Now, the prosecution says Reed hit O'Keefe with her SUV. The defense says she dropped him off at a party and left, and throughout the trial is trying to intimate that maybe he died as a result of a fight at that party. Now the court's in their morning break, but Scortibello has been explaining all morning her observations about O'Keefe's injuries. So let's bring in ABC News Live anchor Phil Lipoff and civil trial attorney Tre Lovell to talk more about this. Tre, how do you think they're doing so far with trying to explain, she's on the stand for the prosecution right now, so trying to explain beyond a reasonable doubt that this was a sound conclusion, that he died as a result of being hit by an SUV?
I think they're doing a pretty good job, but they just have a lot to work with. If you can't conclusively opine the cause of death that's consistent with the prosecution, it's tough, because the jurors are looking to the science for some answers that's conclusive. So it's a little bit of a push, but I think they're doing a good job. They need to establish through this expert is the injuries that they can also show to the jury that's consistent with the prosecution's case, and then all the other evidence combined with that, will climb the mountain to beyond reasonable doubt.
Trey, what are you watching for next with this witness?
So we're going to get closer and closer to her opinions regarding the cause of death, the manner of death, and I'm really looking to the cross examination because that's going to really determine whether or not this witness is credible and the jury's going to accept what she's saying. The fact that they may not be able to conclusively establish that she believes this was the cause of death is a problem, as I noted. But I think they got to paint the clearest picture they can. But I think the cross examination is going to be very illuminating.
All right, Phil Lipoff, Tre Lovell, thank you both.